I know they were under considerable pressure being the home team or the host team in an event that has sometimes felt like a cross between the Olympics of the art world and the UN of the art world. But Team Bombay, you've done well. Uh, I'm going to, because we're running out of time, I'm just going to do a very, very quick, very short response, and I'm going to do it in the form because there are five of you of the Yaksha Prashna, which is a form in the Mahabharata, single question, one-line answer. Gitanjali began, no, I'm not asking you the question, I'm doing, yeah. Gitanjali began by asking the question of, what is it that you want to do? And Gitanjali answered, I want to build other worlds. The question then became, but how do you build other worlds? And Ashok and Shaina answered by hacking into infrastructure. The question then was, but how do you hack into such heavy, monumental infrastructure? And Ashok and Shaina continued by saying, by using the smallest and lightest of tools that you can. But what is the attitude required for building possible worlds? And Prasad and Rupali answered, by pursuing your trips and your kicks. And what do you do when you pursue your trips and kicks? And the answer was, the Yaksha said, you build other possible worlds. So that's my very quick, short kind of thing, because we don't have the time. But just in terms of a final kind of a thing that I wanted to link up, since the Sainath question came up over and over again, which is that, if the affective labors that are required to build these possible worlds, not in some anterior future, but in terms of an awareness and an attentiveness to the durative present, which is, I think, underruns all three of your presentations, if that affective labor is really of a ludic form, which requires, in a way, not to, collapse all our narratives into either utilitarian or economic arguments, but really looking at all these false pleasures and the false sorrows. And as Roncier said, what if the real sorrow lies in not being able to enjoy the false ones? Might then lead us to the suggestion that Sainath's account of the heavy real is a necessary but an inadequate one without an account of false sorrows, or to rephrase Faiz, aur bhi mohabbat hai zamane mein gam ke siwa. So I'll open this out for a discussion because it's about Bombay, and I'm sure there are many, many interventions. They didn't get to complete their presentations, but maybe you can bring that into the discussion, yeah?
The last presentation. Why do you call it industrial living? Because the chawls were actually more about community living.
So basically, it's a typology, right? It's an industrial living typology. So there are two types of chawls. This particular one came up with the mills, right? It was basically the mills in the city of Mumbai, and then there were the chawls that were built for the mill workers to live in. There were chawls. There were a form of chawls even before the industries came in, which are the inner city. Okay, these were actually older agrarian vadas that came up from Maharashtra and other places that were then multi-tenanted. So these are often called wadis. Okay, so that's the difference. That's why we said it's the industrial housing form is the chawl.
Yeah, thanks for the lovely talk. I have nothing more to say. I'm overwhelmed, especially by these clever architects. How do you kind of feed back this into your architectural practice? I mean, do you build, and do you think about building in a way that could be used and misused, like it is the common practice of extending space and so on?
Yeah. Okay. So. No, so precisely, again, drawing back on Sainath's kind of example yesterday, that kind of living is only perhaps 1%, right? Most of the city is actually built like that. It's built incrementally, right? And so there's a lot of possibilities and of actually engaging in kind of practices. People are doing them themselves. We also actually worked with several communities to actually start looking at, there was once where we worked with a manual where contractors, because a lot of, almost 65% of the city is made with smaller contractors, right? So working with smaller contractors, but I mean, it was very interesting because a lot of times the contractor's like, oh, we know how to do this, right? So there's this kind of dialogue, there's a lot of kind of back and forth. There is no, I would say, process where one is an expert, right, and the other is not. So there's a lot of that kind of practice is possible to really sort of start looking at the city in very different ways than what is kind of projected.
No, 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 no.
That I didn't understand it, or does it have any consequences?
No, no, it's a evolving kind of a practice, and we, I mean, the city was changing very very quickly, and we were at inside that city, and it was kind of it was moving so fast, and we were moving with it, so it was impossible to hold it, because you are kind of moving also. And at that moment there were so many, and that moment in the city, and even today I think the disciplines of urban studies, planning, architecture, development practices, they kind of push through a certain set of urges, an urge to map, an urge to find a problem, an urge to intervene, an urge to kind of save the world and stuff like that. So we started doing all of those things. And then when you start doing those things, then you realize that, well, the city hits you back with a very awkward, oblique material, and then you don't know what to do with it. And that's what happened. So it's in that sense, it's an evolving thing.
It's a lovely answer, but I have to insist. In Germany now we have, news. You can do new studies. They are called, for instance, metropolitan studies, for instance. And you think like, well, what is this? Cultural studies concentrating on cities, or do people want to build, or is it just... I like that you come from architecture, and architects are usually people who insist on not reflecting but knowing what is to do, and which is often a problem, and it's wonderful how you do exactly the opposite. But nevertheless, I see in the city, at least, for instance, next to Ashok and Shaina's wonderful studio, there's expensive apartment block, and obviously a deal was made before the people who lived there were cleared out. A kind of social house came up where people were kind of forced to go into. So there must be some kind of negotiations going on, and architects involved also in these situations. Would this be something where you would work? Or?
Yeah. I mean, all of us, we wouldn't look at those buildings that came up near Shaina's, and they're everywhere, as completely different and in their production than the others which are coming up, because they're equally negotiated and equally thick in their production, in the production process. So for example, I mean, to kind of build a building like this, the one that is next to their house, it would have taken at least 10 years to kind of go through the entire process of getting approvals and stuff like that, and that is a very long extended process, and even the way, it's never a single agency, a single agent who will kind of go through it. The process of actually making, like in Mumbai, we have this figure of a developer, and we work with developers, and then when you go very close to the developer, you realize that, well, there are real estate agents, there are investors, there are brokers, there are kind of, architects, public sector employees, government approval agents. This whole, the developer kind of, breaks down. And then it's a similar process which happens everywhere. It kind of, it breaks down, and then they reconfigure. they reconfigure. So I wouldn't say formally, of course, they're different because kind of investments and land politics and approval process are different. But the production process is kind of elongated and thick.
Okay, so this was a really great lineup. I just have a teeny question because I'm curious about your references. Ashok, you briefly sort of mentioned, mumbled Arvatov and moved on, didn't you? Did you mention a 1925 text by Arvatov?
Yes.
Yes. Could you maybe elaborate on that? I just missed the
Russian architect.
Yeah, could you just elaborate? Like elaborate on which text, the reading, what, why, in relation to.
No, I was talking about a text that I came across recently. It's a translation of not an architectural text. It's a 1925 text whose Arvatov. Yes. So it's a text which I think the English title is Social Things or something like this. Yeah, I can find it for you. But the basic argument is that it is an anti-Marxist argument where he says that we are too obsessed with this production of objects and we should think of them as comrades. And how do we do that? That's the one line.
I have a question to Shaina and to Ashok as well about Padma. I'm very interested in how it works, and you visited us in Cairo before and did a workshop on it and on the software that you use. I'm actually more interested in how the online archived material, and that is mainly footage, raw footage, how is it being utilized later on? How is it utilized later by users? Because it's open, it's free, people can download it. Are you familiar with, or how much do you know about other practices that that utilize this material? What happens with it? Does it get to be screened or edited in a longer film, or what does it do?
Some of us will have an opportunity to see this with Zinnia, who works on it, and I also want you to be able to. I mean, you're welcome to come and have a more, have a half a day to see it.
So I guess the reason the archive is in many ways fundamentally different from building, collecting video images and then using a sort of WordPress framework and then linking to videos on YouTube is that I think in our imagination of building Padma, and it's 8 years now, we kind of, for want of a better word, or I think I'm going to like this word, imagined a kind of permaculture, right? How do you build from bottom up? How do you keep it completely autonomous? How do you really make it not just about the finished film, but look at the digitized 99 hours of tape that you didn't use in your 60-minute documentary because you maybe had 100 hours of footage? So it's a very slow process in even getting an hour of video in, and I'm still, so that's what I'm trying to get at is the putting in takes so much care and focus that is still in many ways where we're at. Not to say that people don't download the film Ashok. That film then was made from footage in Padma. People use it all the time, but because it's not just finished films, the material gets used pedagogically, it gets written over, it's cited, it's referenced in many other ways, not necessarily a finished film.
All right, so we will have to wrap up there.
And just a very tiny, additional question to that. Do you have any issues here with the censorship? Like, do you have
There's many things hidden. I mean, we have to be cautious, and everything in Padma is not, it's all there, it's online, it's not fully public. Sorry.
To clarify, while the amendment to the law extended, the censorship law, which is the Cinematograph Act, to video, there is an ambiguity as far as online videos are concerned. There is a concerted move now in terms of bringing down the internet effectively by extending that act to online video. That hasn't happened yet. So we can, in the meanwhile, take advantage of that gray zone that still lies there. All right, so thank you, Team Bombay. Well done.